looked at that and I was like, well, that's funny because all these other people that had seen Jesus didn't make such bold, definitive statements, and he wasn't even bold enough to make a definitive statement. And so that kind of turned me away from Christianity. And so I started just researching outward from Abrahamic faiths. I wasn't really interested if Christianity, if that Abrahamic God wasn't correct, I wasn't really interested in seeing like the Jewish or the Islamic version, because I felt like Christianity had a pretty good grasp on everything in terms of the Abrahamic faiths. And so that turned me away. But then I started researching the Islam and the Quran, and the more I read it, the more appreciation and interest I had in people like God and Jesus and the prophet Joseph and Jonah and Noah and all them. But like I could not at all get along with the fact of giving a source of divinity to Jesus and taking that source of humanization and giving it to God by saying he has a son. I was like, that's too humanizing of an almighty being, and then that's too idolizing of a human is just a person, just a prophet. And so like for me, I just realized that my comfort was when I didn't need an intercessor. I didn't need to go through Jesus or a priest or a pastor. I could just go straight to God. And that's a big thing with Islam, because it's believed that when you're praying, you're standing directly before God, because we lay out our prayer rugs and all, and that's why we do the ritualistic cleansings before we go pray. We wash like our heads, our face, our feet, our hands, and we cover up a specific way. Like men have to dress a certain way and women have to dress a certain way, and it's because you're laying literally before God in that moment.
Hey, your name is Lacey, right?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So what religion do you believe in?
I'm a Muslim, so I believe in Islam.
Okay.
And so for you?
I'm a Christian.
What denomination do you have?
Denomination? Really non-denomination, but yeah.
Always raised Christian or just?
Yeah, I was always raised Christian, but I have Baptist roots, I have Pentecostal roots,
Okay.
I have Kojic roots. So I have a mix, I have a nice mix, so it's pretty good. So do you believe in God or another deity?
I believe in God, the Abrahamic God. So the same God of the Jews, the Christians, the Muslims.
Okay.
And then same for you.
yeah, same for me, of course, yeah.
So how would you classify that in terms of, like, you believe in God? Because I know some Christians have different views with the Trinity.
Yeah, that's what I was just about to talk about. Yeah, so we believe in the God of Abraham, of course, but I believe in the Trinity, personally. The Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, so the Son, Jesus. And I've heard, like, you guys believe in Jesus, well, not believe in him, but, like, think of him as a prophet. Is that true?
Yeah, he's a prophet. I was going to say, we believe that he is a prophet of God, that he was born of the Virgin Mary, that he did pretty much anything that you're going to find in the Bible. We just don't believe that he was the actual Son of God. We don't believe he was crucified for anybody's sins, and we don't believe he was resurrected from anything.
Okay. Oh, wow. Okay. So how do you believe, like, the virgin birth, is that like a miracle for you guys too?
I was going to say the exact same thing as the Christians that believe that Mary was a blessed woman and she was a very pure woman. So God chose her to bring the prophet Jesus, peace be upon him, into the world, and so she had a virgin birth. And It was a big miracle, and then you've got baby Jesus.
Oh, that's cool. So, like, what about, like, well, we believe, like, Jesus was prophesied to be the Messiah. Do you guys believe, like, he had preordained prophecies to come?
Pretty much every prophet, I would say, had preordained prophecies to come. We don't believe he was... We believe he was the Messiah in the sense that he was sent for a specific purpose, and that purpose's title was fulfilled with the title Messiah. But, like, we don't believe that he's any type of otherworldly force, and anything he can do outside of his own capacity is strictly by the grace of God and by the power of God.
Gotcha.
And not any of his own being or his own divinity.
Makes sense.
So when did you choose your fate?
Well, for me,
Just born into it?
basically born into it. But when did I really have my personal experience as a Christian? I probably was around 18. I'm 23 now. And I just really wanted to know what truth is, like, no matter what form it came in. And I remember I was reading a book, and I was like, because what I was debating on was Christianity versus Islam. And I was like, whichever one is true, whichever one I find God in, that I believe in, then that's what I'm going to go with. And so I read a book, and it was a book written by a Muslim who actually converted to a Christian, because I was like, no, I don't want to read a book about somebody who was really born into the Christian
What was the
society.
title?
I can't remember.
Because there's one real common one. What is it? Seeking a law, finding Jesus, or something like that. That's a really common one. You probably would like it.
I think I've seen that.
I was gonna say you probably would like that one then.
It was pretty good. That's exactly which one it was. That's exactly which one. I got it from the Christian bookstore to be exact.
It's a real popular one.
Yeah. So when did you choose your faith?
2 years ago.
2 years ago?
I was raised as a Christian. I was raised in a Southern Baptist house. My uncle was a Southern Baptist pastor. Went to church 3+ times a week. Served mission trips. I taught the middle school girls, and I did a bunch of lectures on Christianity and the theology and all that. And I pretty much, from the age of 13 to 18, didn't believe any of it. I was just doing it out of the matter of, this is what I was taught as a child. My parents enjoy doing this, so I'm going to be the good child and go do these things for them. And then by the time I was 18, I was like, yeah, I'm not interested. And I had moved out. And I ended up going back to a church for a good year. And after that, I've read the entire Bible. I've gone to the Catholic church and read all the Catholic Bible and looked at everything, and nothing matched up the way I needed it to. However, when I read the Quran, there was an intense amount of science and history that backed it, and that completely cultivated a real sense of logic and capacity, and like in terms of God, when normally I felt like God was a very illogical thing for me to approach because of the lack of tangibility. And the Quran really gave that, and the stipulations it gave on everything really directed me to see more of a sense of God and legitimacy in it than I had seen in anything else.
Oh, this just got 10 times better. It really has. For me, I went through the same thing, but I found God back through Christianity. So I can definitely relate, because I was really like in my room, and I was crying. Like, I wanted to know what was real, what was truth. And so when I had my experience similar to you, I found Jesus to be God.
Where am I?
So
what does your day consist of as a Christian?
What does my day consist of as a Christian? I wake up, I pray, of course, but it's really a lifestyle for me. I really like Christianity. Christianity to me is my everyday walk with. It's like, how do I show love? Because what I believe God is love overall. Like that's what the Bible says too. He is love. And so what my day as a Christian looks like is, how can I show as much love as possible? And a lot of that really consists of me killing my pride in different areas, because like pride and love, it really clashes for me. So just how can I show as much love as possible?
Yeah.
And be the next best version of myself. What does it look like for you?
Let's see. So Muslims, we have 5 daily prayers. So I get up at sunrise to do my first prayer, and then the rest of the prayers just go out throughout the day, depending on where the sun is at the time. So we do that. Usually read some Quran. If it's a Friday, you go to the mosque for Jummah, which is basically like your Sunday service.
Okay.
Otherwise, it's pretty much just like anybody else's day. It's probably like any day that a Christian or Jew would have. Muslims have a couple extra steps in terms of like, we have like ritualistic cleansings and stuff we have to do before prayers, and we actually have like prescribed prayers, and then we have like dietary restrictions and occasionally fasting. But like on an average day to day, it's just you wake up, you do your prayers, you go about your business, take your kids to school, clean your house, go run some groceries, read your Quran, watch some lectures, that kind of thing. Go hang out with some more Muslims.
Okay. Do you hang out with Christians?
Oh yeah, I was gonna say all my friends are. I'm the only Muslim that pretty much any of my friends know.
Okay. And for me, like my week, Bible study on Wednesdays, prayer on Mondays, and then I have rehearsals because I'm a musician.
Choirs and stuff, yeah. Nice. Let's see. What made you say being a Christian was the right choice for you?
What made it be the right choice for me? It was because Christianity was tangible to me, actually. I could relate to Jesus. It's just something about him that was just so relatable to me. And then when I look at the New Testament, I see Peter, I see all the different testimonies in the Bible, and it's just so, it fits right. It feels right. honestly, it came first from a feeling. I was like, it feels right, but then the feeling wasn't enough. It just wasn't enough. And then I did my research. I was like, because it's not lining up. Everything wasn't lining up how I wanted to. So once I did my research and everything started lining up that way, to a point where I could believe it. So it was a feeling, then it became more natural.
Okay.
So what about you?
So let's see. So being raised Christian, I had to decide Christianity wasn't right for me, if something else was, and then that Islam was. And for me, when I found Islam, the Bible has been something I've always been incredibly uncomfortable with in terms of its legitimacy and history that backs it. There's large portions of it that I completely agree seem extremely legit and real, and they've been proven. And then there's also other portions that I think are extremely important that have a lot of issues in terms of anywhere from just like the actual words itself to the history to, you know, anything that people actually know about the books.
You have an example?
So,
An example?
well, I mean, Paul alone, I was going to say, I have a lot of problems with Paul. The man that never saw Jesus, he was one of the first ones to say he's the Son of God. You know, before Jesus would even say, yeah, I'm the Son of God, he would never answer that directly. Yet Paul's like, no, he's the Son of God. I never saw him, and I killed a bunch of Christians, and then I fell off of my donkey, but he's the Son of God. And like, that always struck me. I was like, there's obviously two ways you can see that. It's like, wow, this miraculous change, and that's so great. And like, I can see that obviously, because it's this great, the Bible's full of those great transformation stories. That's very clearly a consistent, you know, purpose of the book. But for me, I looked at that and I was like, well, that's funny because all these other people that had seen Jesus didn't make such bold, definitive statements, and he wasn't even bold enough to make a definitive statement. And so that kind of turned me away from Christianity. And so I started just researching outward from Abrahamic faiths. I wasn't really interested if Christianity, if that Abrahamic God wasn't correct, I wasn't really interested in seeing like the Jewish or the Islamic version, because I felt like Christianity had a pretty good grasp on everything in terms of the Abrahamic faiths. And so that turned me away. But then I started researching the Islam and the Quran, and the more I read it, the more appreciation and interest I had in people like God and Jesus and you know, the prophet Joseph and Jonah and Noah and all them. But like, I could not at all get along with the fact of giving a source of divinity to Jesus and taking that source of humanization and giving it to God by saying he has a son. I was like, that's too humanizing of an almighty being, and then that's too idolizing of a measle, of a human who's just a person, just a prophet. And so like, for me, I just realized that my comfort was when I didn't need an intercessor. I didn't need to go through Jesus or a priest or a pastor. I could just go straight to God. And that's a big thing with Islam, because it's believed that when you're praying, you're standing directly before God, because we lay out our prayer rugs and all, and that's why we do the ritualistic cleansings before we go pray. We wash like our heads, our face, our feet, our hands, and we cover up a specific way. Like, men have to dress a certain way and women have to dress a certain way, and it's because you're laying literally before God in that moment. And so for me, it was a much more of a direct correlation and direct connection. And so I think I just latched onto it in a much healthier way and with much better wants and desires out of the religion than Christianity did for me.
That's interesting, because I share so many of the same like opinions and views. Because like, for me, like, the reason I'm not Catholic is because I don't agree with me having to go through a priest. And that's what I believe the purpose of Jesus is. Because when Jesus was crucified on the cross, the veil tore, that only the priest could go in to enter to really be face to face with God. And so one of my biggest problems was that I did not feel, I was wondering how could my faith in Jesus how can I believe in a human and believe in God at the same time? So I do understand. But Jesus allowed, like, for me, Jesus allowed me to go face to face. He was a bridge to get to God. Like, he was a bridge that allowed me to see God face to face. So like, in my church, we experience the presence of God. Like, we feel his glory come down. We can sense it. Our spirit jumps loud when we usher in his presence through our worship. So I definitely understand.
I'll say, I guess for me, because like, with the first commandment, put no other God before me, I was like, all right, that ends my argument for me. Because, like, for me, it was the Jesus, pretty much you have to believe, like, in the Trinity. And I don't buy into the whole 1 and 3 and this and that. I'm like, you either 1 or you're 3. And if you're 3, then you're 3 gods. And so who am I worshiping if you're 1 God? And so and then, like, the whole don't worship another God before me. And I was just like, all right, then I won't. And so for Islam, that's why it was just that direct connection. Because for Jesus, for me, that's not a bridge. For me, that's an idol. And, like, for me, like, seeing that, at least the way that I see a lot of people approach Jesus, it really approaches him in a source of an idol. When I'm like, there is nothing that you can ask for from Jesus that God cannot give you as well, and that God does not give Jesus the power to give as well. Because even if Jesus is the Son of God, then he, Son, Father, still answers to the Father and still does the will of the Father, and the will ultimately comes back to the Father as a whole. And so I'm like, so it almost, there's not much as a purpose for him, and that view for me. And then when it brings in the crucifixion, I was like, I don't want a God that requires blood for me. I was like, I don't want a God that requires me to be held accountable for the sins of my father and his father, and I don't want a God that requires, people who are, thrown in the middle of a desert or a jungle somewhere to grow up hearing nothing of God, to be damned to hell because of where he placed them in his divine knowledge. And I was like, if you're so divine, why would you do that? And so that was the type of God that Christianity perpetuated towards me, and that was the kind of ideology of Jesus and the crucifixion of, I need blood, I need someone needs to die for the sins that I've allowed you to enter in, for this world that I've created for you and the sins that I've set out in it, for you to, take or not, that's on you. That's not God's problem, obviously, if you sin. You choose to do what you do. I believe you have free will. But it just wasn't the God that I was like, I want to bow down to you. I was like, I don't want to bow down to you if you need to kill your son for me. I was like, I should be able to get my act together so you don't have to kill another person for me. And no person, Son of God, no person should be able to cover for my sins for what I did. I'm like, you do you, I do me. And as much of a nice gesture and a nice, like, security net, essentially, like, that sounds like a bad way to put it, but, like, in the nicest form, a security net. Like, Jesus definitely offers that ideology of, he died for your sins, and I see why it's so appealing, and it is logical to a sense. But then, like, once I stepped back, I was like, I can't. And so for me, Islam took away all that, and it was, you have God. If you want to go to God, you go to God. And these prophets are just here to tell you, hey, you have one God. Only talk to that God. Please go talk to him. And that's pretty much all Islam taught over and over. It's really big about that inner deep connection, and that's really what I've connected to.
So for me, I believe the Bible is a love story. And so when we talk about blood being shed, what better way to show your love than to sacrifice your life for a brother? And when you say God, Jesus being the Son of God, Son for me with Jesus is an extension of him. Like, I share the same name as my father, and so, like, my dad looks at me as a seed of him. But when you have Jesus, like, the best way for me to understand him, the most relatable way for me to understand Jesus as an extension of God, Jesus as an extension of God, is to be son. Also, I have a question. Like, for you guys back in the Abraham days before, like, the New Testament, which is something we believe in, do y'all believe in, like, the lambs being shed?
Like animal sacrifice? So
like
I can go with animal sacrifice, human sacrifice are like two totally different spectrums, can't even be compared to me.
Okay.
So, like, obviously there's different animal sacrifices that are believed in, and now they're strictly ritual based. There's not much, they're part of your worship. There's one day a year that people sacrifice lambs, and that's one of our Eids. And then we all eat the lamb, or it's given to other people that can't eat.
Okay.
And then also during Hajj, the big pilgrimage, they'll sacrifice like one lamb. Now, mind you, like, before Hajj, there used to be not many people going, and so each person or family would sacrifice like their own animal. But now, there's millions going, so they sacrifice like one animal for, a giant group type of thing.
That makes sense.
One thing I found interesting about you saying Jesus being like the extension of, just another version of the extension, that's extremely similar to how Hinduism sees all their gods. All their gods are extensions of Brahman. They're one God, and then they're just all extensions. The Hindus only believe in one God. They believe in one singular God, and then everything goes off of that. And so, like, that was why, like, Christianity, I think, struck me as so polytheistic in a way that I didn't like, is because it mimics that same ideology of, no, it's only one. And we have this one soul, you know, source and one soul power and will and creator, but he can manifest himself in these different forms for the people to serve him in these different ways, or for this or for that. And so it was just too similar of a concept, I think, is why it rubbed me the wrong way.
Okay.
And it was just right there.
I definitely, I can see where you're coming from. That was explained well. And I have a question. I heard you mention hell. Do you believe in hell?
Oh, yeah. So I believe in heaven and hell. I don't necessarily go with the full ideology that it is such a physical place.
Okay.
As much as I've seen it very clearly in almost any religion. Almost every religion can at least say, if nothing else, hell and heaven is just your nearness or how far away you are from God and how close you are to God. And so at a minimum, I believe hell is being full separation from God, which essentially is what hell is described as, is when you're removed from God, you're not in his presence anymore, is that full separation. And then heaven is just that what you realize your oneness and your closeness to God and him as your creator. And so obviously there's a pure bliss in that, and then there's a pure, you know, dread and being completely removed from like the one unit of life, basically. I'm not saying there's not like a physical place, but I don't personally think that there's a permanent, perpetual physical torment for people that don't believe in this life. I do think that there will be some form of punishment. I don't know if it will necessarily be physical or mental or spirit, like how that will play out, but it will definitely be something that people remember, and it's torment, you know, it's described as torment, so it's definitely something to cause pain, but I don't see it as being a permanent, perpetual pain. I think eventually everybody's time will be done, kind of thing.
So like time will be done, so you'd be like, we no longer exist.
Well, time will be done in the sense of you've done your punishment. You can move closer to God now. Like, you don't have to spend eternity. I don't see hell as an eternal abode. I think it can be, and I don't think it's a short abode. So I don't think it's like, oh, I'm here for a day. It may feel like thousands and thousands and thousands of years, which might as well be eternity. We're just humans. We only live for like 60 to 80. Okay. So that seems like eternity to us. Because I feel like numbers and all the like Abrahamic texts are very, very figurative. They can be sometimes legitimate, sometimes not. You know, numbers just mean a lot.
Makes sense. It's like when you're talking about hell, is that like is that like your opinion, or that's was like you've proven through your faith?
So you have a different, depending if you're talking about Shia, Ahmadiyya, Sunni, or Sufi Muslims, you're going to get a little bit different on all views in terms of hell. The Sufis definitely define hell more like I just did, the nearness or closeness to God that you feel like, and how far away from God, and that it's not like a physical thing, and that eventually Sufis tend to promote that. Sunnis or Salafis, which are like another branch of Sunnis, they're much more conservative. And they're going to promote like the real classic, almost Catholic ideology of hell. You've got like a physical heaven, a physical hell. Mm-hmm. There's like, somebody like angels and demons down in there like tormenting and fire and brimstone. So it kind of just depends on where you fall denomination-wise, just about.
That makes sense.
But everybody has the ultimate view of, you don't want to be in hell.
Okay. So what about Satan and the devil, since we're talking about hell? Do you believe in the devil? Yeah.
The shaitan. So like shaitan is just the Arabic word for him, and the devil entirely. He was one of God's creation, thought he knew better, refused to bow down to God and his creation of man, and so was cast out. And I don't see in Islam, I don't feel like we give the devil as much, I don't want to say credit, but influence maybe, yeah, like we just don't pay him as much attention because it's a little irrelevant, because he's, you know what I mean, because it's just like he really doesn't have that much say over much of anything. It's like you are a thing that exists because you're there. You have literally no power over anything I do.
That's what we believe too. That's what,
so I'm just like
in my faith, I tend to see people give him a lot of credit and a lot of power, and it's almost like a
way
worship.
More than you need to. I'm way like, more. He has no power.
Yeah, so like I definitely agree with that, because in my faith I see it all the time.
Oh yeah.
I see it all the time.
And it's so far because I'm like, I think a lot of people forget, I'm like, that one little mental aspect, I'm like, when you're thinking that you're giving all this power, I'm like, you're giving him your energy. I'm like, so of course you're giving him power. I'm like, you're giving him your power.
Right.
I was like, he doesn't have his own, you're giving it to him. I'm like, because God doesn't get, God's not fueling him to come after you.
Right.
I'm like, so I feel like a lot of it can almost be like a mental battle for some people.
It is. And then like with Satan, it negates like free will. Like, how can you give him so much credit of something we have free will on?
You have free will.
But also, like when Adam and Eve, what Satan did was he did bring his influence. He didn't. They had a decision themselves, but his influence is really what started them to that direction.
Which, yeah, because we believe, same story of Adam and Eve, the Garden of Eden and all, like, it's the exact same story between Christianity and Islam.
Sure.
Well, ours is a little bit more fun in terms of when they got kicked out of the garden, they were, like, kicked out to earth, and so, like, they were giants. Like, they were just, like, giant people on earth. Like, so our story's a little bit more fun with that. It's like, you get giants on earth after that. And they had to, part of their punishment is they had to find each other again. At least that's, like, kind of what's taught in Islam, is that when they were kicked down to earth, they were separated, and so they had, they were huge, but they had the earth, and they had to find each other again to find that companionship again, just like we have to find God and all that. So it's kind of a fun thing.
So is the devil, Satan, is he permanent in hell? In your face?
Yes, essentially. I mean, he will basically, he's never going to not be tormented kind of thing. Like, that's the one where it's like, you're stuck in hell for eternity.
So
like, you will never be, he's never going to be close to God. That is, he's severed that, and he has completely removed himself by choice from God kind of thing.
Okay.
So what do you think heaven and hell looks like?
Oh, so for me personally, I think heaven is a state of being. It's like you ever heard like somebody, like think about one of the best moments of your life. And then heaven is like you're stuck there. Hell, one of the worst moments of your life. Thinking about that state of being, and now you're stuck there. So that's what I believe it is. Because like, when you're talking like our physical feeling, hell is more, and heaven is more spiritual. And so I think about it being as a state rather than like the place is your state of being.
Okay.
So why should someone start believing in God?
I guess wherever they want to. I mean, it really is just, there's not necessarily an overall pro to believing God, to not believing in God. It's completely your mindset. I think for some people, they believe in God, and it is an incredibly negative and bad thing for them, and they use it in ways that completely degress their life. And then other people, they find belief in God, and it completely progresses them. So, like, I don't really think there's a reason. I think it's just, if you're ready to really step back and go through introspection and self-critique and study and just really be completely vulnerable, then that's why you should start believing in God. Because, I mean, at that moment, to have a relationship with God that is at all worth your while and worth your efforts, and that you're going to feel like you've got anything out of, you have to be very open and very vulnerable and very devoted and willing to sacrifice, and just, you got to want it. And so I feel like if you don't want to believe in God, then you're not going to. And it's because no matter what, there is an element of faith that will be required, since we can't physically touch or see or smell God. So you just have to choose to. So I think it's really, do you want to have that belief? And for a lot of people, they're like, I shouldn't have to want to have a belief. And I'm like, I get that, trust me. That I would love, I've thought about the same thing, but I think it just comes down to that.
Why, like, if I were to ask you, like, when I asked why would someone start believing in God, but like for you, why would you start believing in a God you really can't see?
Because in the Quran, for me, just comes back to the Quran. I read the Quran there, with the amount of scientific miracles that are in there, that would be absolutely absurdly impossible for a man 1400 years ago that was even illiterate to know, that he discovered in a cave. Like, blows my mind. I mean, he goes all the way down to describing what a fetus looks like in each stage of gestation, and describes it in great detail, and how mountains are formed under the earth, and how the universe is ever expanding, and how when it ends, like black holes. I mean, it goes into such deep depth, and I'm just like, you were on to something. I'm like, somebody talked to you.
What
I was
are you
like,
talking about?
Muhammad, Prophet Muhammad. That's how like Islam came about. That's how the Quran, that's all through the Quran. So, and that's for me. that's why I started believing in God. I was like, I can't argue with science. I can argue with my feelings or, an urge or this or that, but I'm like, I cannot argue with the fact that this is what a fetus looks like. This is what a mountain is, and this is what a black hole is, and this is what the universe is doing. That's not an argumenting point. I'm like, this is just a fact of the matter. And for me, that was I like logic. I like my God to have logic.
Mm-hmm. So you need so with Muhammad, he brought a sense of reality to God.
For me, it felt like a sense of completion. I feel like the Jews really drove home the legality of God and the legal aspects. The Torah is very, very well versed in terms of how to live your life, step by step. A lot of rules. They're known for being, the legal ones. And then Christians, I feel like they definitely brought in a really good aspect of spirituality, and then the terms of you think for yourself, it is between you and God, start exploring different denominations and all that. That was a very positive thing for just religion in general. And then Muslims, with the Prophet Muhammad, Muslims brought in a lot of science, a lot of logic, and just practicality to it of, great, this is how you're going to practically use all the laws that you learned from here and all the spirituality you were given from here, and you're going to combine and do this. And so for me, it just kind of laid it out in a way that felt whole. It made God feel whole for me.
That makes sense. It gave you a sense of security.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, entirely.
Okay, that makes sense. And it's crazy because that's the same way I feel about Jesus. Mm-hmm. He came. I believe he came to the earth to make it practical, mm-hmm. because we were confused. We had the Pharisees and the Sadducees, mm-hmm. and the scribes and the Pharisees. I meant, and we're looking at them wow. I mean, we see the logistics, how legal it can be, legalistic it can be. And when Jesus came down, he was like, wait a minute. You guys are missing the point. Mm-hmm. I see y'all going through the motions, but it's not really practical to y'all. You guys don't have relationship with God. You only just going through the motions. Mm-hmm. And so he came down and he made everything, he showed us this is how you walk. Mm-hmm. we were struggling on trying to figure this thing out with God. And it's God himself came down, mm-hmm. and said, this is, because we were struggling with our walk, and if I can do it, you can do it. So it was, to me, it's deeper than just him sacrificing. He showed us how to walk every day, mm-hmm. because he did it. So now God, to me, is tangible. He's not holding me to a standard, something he's never done.
See, and Muslims, we believe that Jesus did all the same things too. So we believe that he showed us how to walk. You should do like Jesus do. What would Jesus do? Do whatever he would do. It's one of this, I really love, because when I'm out, strangers come up to me 24/7. I mean, we had to ban somebody from my work the other day for getting belligerent and yelling at me because
Seriously?
Mm-hmm. It's the regular. If I go out, it's it's the regular. I mean, I lost my job because of it at one place. So it's repetitive, and I feel like he just, we see him, people always assume, with Muslims, they're just oh, Jesus loves you. And I'm like, yeah, I know. I love him too. I read his words. There's Mary has a whole book in the Quran. She has an entire book devoted to Mary in the Quran. And I'm I know a lot about Jesus and Mary. They're a huge focal point of Islam. And I think a lot of people, what a lot of divide with Christians and Muslims come in is so many Christians, you've actually researched Islam, so you know something about it, but so many Christians have no idea.
Islam.
Yeah, see, and so many people, they have no idea that Muslims believe and love Jesus all, mm-hmm. the same. All those commandments and the miracles, I'm we are right there. Up to the crucifixion, we are side by side. And I'm and that is a huge portion of his life. And I'm to me, that shows way more similarities than differences. And I think if people could realize that for a second, I'm obviously the crucifixion's a huge, huge turning point in both religions.
Oh, for sure.
But I'm
for sure, it changed the game.
Yeah, I'm there's a good 40 years beforehand, though, of acts that we all agree on, so we can focus on that, you know what I mean? It's we have that common ground in there.
It's definitely, it starts to go hand in hand, in hand. And so that's why when I was in my crisis, those are the two I chose, mm-hmm. because. And I was over, one of my mentors, one of my best friends. We used to ride every day together. He was in his 60s before he passed, yeah. And so, he told me everything about it. He knew both sides, studied both sides, and I would ask question after question after question after question. So this is really interesting to me.
So what should a believer do before they die?
What should a believer do before they die?
Yes, I guess within the realms of Christianity.
In the realms of Christianity. Well, if you're a believer, obviously you believe that Jesus died on the cross. So we're talking from those perspectives. But I believe you should go out and show the love of God. Not only share it, but show it. And that's what I believe a big problem in my faith is with other Christians. They would share the love of God, but they won't show it.
What about baptisms or sacraments? Do you think any of those are
I believe
covenants that are needed?
I believe I don't. If you die without being baptized, I don't believe you're going to go to hell. And I believe baptism is just an outward expression that you have been born again. You're a believer.
Yeah.
So.
Okay.
What about you? What should a believer do before they die?
So let's see. So there's pretty much 5 things. You say your shahada, which is your proclamation of faith. If you're born into Islam, you don't necessarily have to say it because we believe everybody's born a Muslim. So you're pretty much a Muslim until you say you're not a Muslim. So baby, toddler walking down the street that doesn't know anything, sure, they're a Muslim until they're like old enough to be like, I'm not a Muslim. So basically, and that's also like, that kind of encompasses basically if like if a child dies unexpectedly, they're covered. Like it's like they're obviously not going to be judged for anything. They're innocent, they're pure. So but that, say your shahada, so that's just that I believe there's no God but God, or Allah, and Muhammad is his messenger, peace be upon him. And then you are to do your daily prayers, which are your salah, so your 5 obligatory prayers. And then you have zakah, which is your charity. You are to give charity. It's similar to tithing because tithing has the 10% of your income. However, the charity that you're expected to give in Islam is 2.5% of your wealth. And there's like an actual amount for that. It's measured in gold. I don't make enough to literally even know the amount that I need to make before I have to give charity. I'm not required to give charity. I am poor. But I still do. I just don't have to give like that actual like mathed out amount, like where I have to, anything I do is just because I want to do it kind of thing. I'm not, under an obligation to. And then also you have Ramadan, so fasting. You're to fast for the month of Ramadan as long as you're an able-bodied adult. And then you are to complete Hajj at least once in your life, the pilgrimage to Mecca, as long as you're an able-bodied and financially able.
Okay, that's cool. Like when you name those things, those are things like currently I'm on a fast this week. So that's something I do in my personal walk, and it's something that we all should do. Fast and pray. Charity. We believe in giving charity no matter how rich or poor you are. So those are things we believe. Those are things we teach, but it's not actually something like we say you're obligated, but we strongly encourage it.
What do people learn about religion in school?
Say that again?
What do people learn about religion in school?
Oh, okay. Well, religion in school, it depends on who's your teacher. In the curriculum, nothing. But when we learn, actually, I learned more about the Muslim faith in school more than I learned about Christianity.
Interesting, because see, we had maybe half a page in our textbook about that big, about Islam, and then the rest I learned was political stuff, had nothing to do with the actual doctrine. Like, I actually go speak at high schools. This past year I've spoken to well over 200 students. I go and I do lectures on Islam, what Islam actually is, because I had, there was one school book, because like, what do schools teach about religion? Not that well, because I had one school book from a local school said that nobody had ever been inside the Kaaba. A teacher commented like, yeah, nobody had ever been, and I was just like, well, I can send you a picture of somebody standing in the Kaaba right now. I was like, so that's a lie. I was like, people are in there every single day and week. I was like, so that's just a lie. So like for me, like you said, it depends on your teacher entirely. And I think in the South, there are a majority of teachers that definitely have irresponsibly put a preference over what they think is academically necessary to teach about and talk about, because I was very well educated on Christianity going to a public school. Like my teacher spent a long time in the world history portion on Christianity, brushed over Islam, but was ready to talk about those wars in Islam. Like, it was like, oh, but Muslims, they got them wars though. So I feel like it painted from the get-go, with very young, vulnerable, impressionable minds, it already have the media giving such negative views. It really painted a very inaccurate representation of what Muslims actually believe, at least in my school. And the students that I've spoken with, they all had extremely poor ideas of what Islam actually was. And a lot of that had to do either because of their pastors, parents, or teachers. And it's really sad because like those are all adults that can look up their own information.
It's more so it's an ignorance. I don't really, for me personally, I don't hold that against them because it's how they were brought up.
See, I do, because I feel like once you're over a certain age, you know how to Google, you know how to read a book. You can walk into a building. I did at 18. I just walked into, multiple religious buildings. So like, I give ignorance to a point, and then I'm like, it is time to grow up, get your act together, and be an adult and actually respectfully educate yourself. Because you can. I'm like, we're in America.
Yeah,
you can educate yourself.
Definitely you can, but that reality.
It's something you have to push for.
That's something you have to push for. It's not something that comes.
You have to set a standard and then hold it.
Right. It's not something that comes natural. It's something that you really have to push for and make it a priority in your life. Like for me, I made it a priority to learn about the Islamic faith because one, it's so close to my faith. Two, I see it a lot. I see like for me. When I first learned about Islam, it was more about, I seen it from a black perspective, brotherhood, and so like probably Malcolm X. So when I look at, for me as a black male, when I look at Christianity versus Muslim, I see Malcolm X versus Martin Luther King. That was my first view of it. Like that was for me, because it's culture, it's cultural. So that was one of my first things. And so you got Malcolm X who's saying, "Boy, let's go fight," because this is it. I'm talking.
Like we're in America. Yeah, you can educate yourself.
Definitely you can, but that reality.
It's something you have to push for.
That's something you have to push for.
You have to set a standard and then hold it.
Right. It's not something that comes natural. It's something that you really have to push for and make it a priority in your life. Like for me, I made it a priority to learn about the Islamic faith because one, it's so close to my faith. Two, I see it a lot. I see like for me, when I first learned about Islam, it was more about, I seen it from a black perspective, brotherhood, and so like probably Malcolm X. So when I look at, for me as a black male, when I look at Christianity versus Muslim, I see Malcolm X versus Martin Luther King. That was my first view of it. Like that was for me, because it's culture, it's cultural. So that was one of my first things. And so you got Malcolm X who's saying, "Boy, let's go fight," because this is it. I'm talking black. He's like, "Hey, we gonna have to put up a fight." You got Martin Luther King who's saying, "Wait, let's take the passive love approach." That's what he was saying. So for me, it's a cultural thing when we talk about this, and so that's from the black perspective.
We talked about Christianity and Islam, which, though they come from the same rod, there's extremely large differences, both culturally and doctrinal based. I think we learned, I feel like me and him, we both understood and knew a lot about each other's faiths in the first place. So for us personally, I don't think there was too much to learn in that regards. I definitely think there was more to learn about how other people maybe view our faiths and learn how each other's groups are affected by our faiths. I definitely think it's something that people should take into perspective is the moment of conversation. Like I told him, I've had a lot of people come at me for my religion before they even know my name, and it's just, if you take a moment to sit down and talk to people, there's a lot of progress and information you can get very quickly and very easily. And so I think it's just a really productive thing to talk to people and realize that your faiths are not that different, and that you have, like Jesus alone, we talked about that. We don't believe in the same crucifixion story, but we agree with about 40 years of his work, which is a majority of what he did. So there's more similarities than differences.
For me, I actually learned something about myself. And what I learned is that I learned that when having a conversation, like say like me and you having a conversation, I still had my defense card in my pocket, ready to pull it out. Like it was there, ready to pull it out, and like it took a moment of me to really see your love before I can actually just toss it to the corner. So I realized I had that defense waiting instead of like really waiting to hear you, like because I feel like sometimes when I've had conversations with Muslims, and it was more so like, oh, I'm gonna attack your Jesus, not really just share what I believe. So I still had the defense card in my pocket, and I didn't know I had it. I thought I got rid of it. So that's one thing I learned about me.